Hello and welcome to the next section of the Lucian. Just to give us a little bit of context, a reminder that Lucian's been talking about the environment that the inhabitants of the Isle of the Blest live in. So in the previous section he's talked about the light and the night, the fact that they live in an environment where it's neither day nor night, sort of almost always twilight. The wind, he said they only have one wind, which is the zephyr, which is the pleasant wind, which is sort of indicative of spring and fertility. Just something to emphasise the great sort of prosperousness of the place. He's talked about the flowers. They've got flowers of every different type, and he finished the last section talking about the grapevines and the fact that they bear fruit 12 times a year, which obviously is a very unusual thing, and again a sign of the great fertility of the land that they inhabit. He's going to continue along that vein in this section, talking about other crops and how often they bear fruit. So we'll leap straight in with that. So he says, Tas de roias, kai tas meleas, kai ten alen oporan, elegon enai tris kai decaphoron. Lots of accusatives here. Tas de roias, tas roias is accusative. And tas meleas is accusative, and ten alen oporan is accusative as well, and that's because you've got elegon here. Elegon obviously coming from legor, I speak or I say, and you can see that that's got ani next to it as well, which is the infinitive of the verb to be. So this is an accusative and infinitive construction. So we're going to start with the verb. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Elegon literally means they were saying, so we'll take it like that to start with, but we may decide to amend it later on. Okay, so they were saying, and then you want your accusatives after that. So they were saying, tas de roias. The de you might want to put in before the elegon, so and they were saying. So, and they were saying, tas de roias, and the roias are pomegranate trees. So they were saying that the pomegranate trees. So they were saying that the pomegranate trees, kai tas meleas, and the meleas are apple trees. There's lots of technical vocabulary in here that you may never ever see again, so don't worry too much about it, but we need to know them for the purposes of reading this, obviously. So they were saying that the pomegranate trees, kai tas meleas, and the apple trees, kai ten alen oporan. Oporan is fruit, so ten alen oporan is and the other fruit, and then your infinitive as part of the accusative infinitive is ani. So they were saying that the pomegranate trees and the apple trees and the other fruits to be, so they said that they were. And then we've got one of these compound adjectives again. We had similar ones in the previous section. Tris kai decaphoron. So tris is 3, kai obviously is and, deca is 10, and then phoron is linked with feror, so it means sort of bearing. So bearing 13 times. So it needs a bit of expansion in English. So bearing fruit 13 times a year. So these ones, if you put that all together, you end up with something like they were saying that the pomegranate and the apple trees and the other fruits were bearing fruit 13 times a year. There's quite a lot packed into quite a short statement. So yes, some of these fruits bear more than once a month. So we're going to elaborate on that in just a moment. Just to come back to elegon though, he doesn't really say who elegon is, who said this. So it might be easier in English just to say it was said. Just create that passive to pull away from having to feel like you're attaching a person to the verb. So it was said that the pomegranate trees and the apple trees and the other fruit were bearing fruit 13 times a year. And then he elaborates on how this works. Henos karmenos tu parautois minoiu dis carpophorein. So we'll start with this phrase here, henos karmenos. Henos comes from heis, which is the number 1, and is in the genitive, and then menos, meaning a month, is also in the genitive as well. when you use a genitive in a time phrase, it shows time within which. Although Greek doesn't have an ablative, it's somehow more precise because of the way it then chooses to divide up the functions between the other cases. So in Latin, you'd have an ablative showing time when or time within. In Greek, time when takes a dative, but time within takes a genitive. So we can see that this phrase means within 1 month. So maybe something like for in a single month. And then you get a phrase describing that month. You can see it's introduced by to, so which is also in the genitive. So this is a description of the word menos, of that month. For within 1 month, to the one, the month, parautois minoiou. The one, and then this is a sandwich phrase actually, because to is agreeing with minou over here. The one called Minoan, or the Minoan month. There's no standard calendar in the Greek world, so each little locality has its own way of counting off the months, and they've got names. So this is the Minoan month on the Isle of the Blest. For within 1 month, that is to say, sort of in brackets, the Minoan. And then you've also got a phrase sandwiched in the middle, par autois. Autois obviously means them, and par, or para, as it would come from, means sort of among. So the one among them called the Minoan. It's quite compressed, this here. So just keep an eye on that and make sure that you're happy that it all makes sense. So if you run that back to the henos over here, so henos garmenos, for within 1 month, to parautois minou, the one called Minoan with them or among them, dis carpophorein. Carpophorein is an infinitive again, and that's because it's still hanging off the elegon on the previous sentence or previous phrase. So it was said that. Then you're going to use that again. For it was said that within 1 month, the one called Minoan among them, carpophorein, they bear fruit this twice. Okay, so in one particular month, these particular fruit trees bear fruit twice. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit complicated, but it's not too difficult. It's just got lots of vocabulary in there which we don't necessarily recognise, and a slightly odd reference to a month called the Minoan. Anyway, let me know if you have issues. On we go. Antide puru hoi stakues arton hetoimon ep archon fusin hosper muketas. So, anti is a word which you actually use in English. You used to use it as a prefix on the front of things. So things like anti-fascist, meaning you're against something. So in that case, against fascism. Which is probably a good thing to be against. In its original form, anti usually means instead of, and it takes a genitive, and you can see we've got one almost immediately afterwards. So anti de puru. So take your de first if you want. De and anti puru, and puru comes from the word puros, which means wheat. Okay, so and instead of wheat. And then you get your subject immediately afterwards. Hoi stakues. So hoi stakues are the ears of corn. So instead of wheat, the ears of corn. And then we're going to need a verb there, I think. And the first one which I can see is fuusin on the next line. Fuor, which means to produce something. So fuusin, they produce. So instead of wheat, antide puru, hoi stakues, the ears of corn, fuusin, they produce, and then you get your accusative, arton hetoimon. They produce, arton is bread, so they produce specifically a loaf of bread, so they produce a loaf of bread, and then hetoimos is a word which is in the GCSE list, which means sort of prepared or ready. Okay, so it's a kind of way of saying ready-made bread. So instead of wheat, the ears of corn produce ready-made loaves of bread. Ep akron. And akros is a word which you may have come across. It's in the word for the very famous monument in Athens, the Acropolis. The Acropolis literally means the sort of top of the city or the high city. So ep which comes from epi, meaning on or at. Ep akron means sort of at the tip. So instead of wheat, the ears of corn produce ready-made loaf of bread. It's technically singular, but it might be easier in English to say loaves of bread. Ep akron, at the tip. And then it just gives us a little visual idea of what this might look like. Horsebear is used to introduce a comparison, so sort of just like, just as. And then muketas are mushrooms, so just like mushrooms. Instead of wheat, the ears of corn produce ready-made bread at the tips, just like mushrooms. You get this idea of a sort of ear of corn with this ballooning loaf of bread on the end of it. Good. Pergaide periten polin hudatos men pente kai hexekonta kai tria kosiai. Melitos de alai tos autai, muru de pentakosiai, microterai mentoi autai, kai potamoi galactos hepta kai oinu octor. Right, there's a lot going on there. This is about half of the paragraph, but thankfully it's quite easy. It's actually just a list, really. He's going to talk about the rivers, or the streams rather, which is what pergai are. Pergai is a stream. So pergai, the streams, and then you get this, and again linked with de, so and, yeah. So and the streams, periten polin, around the city, in the vicinity of the city, and then you get a description of them. Hudatos, of water. Men on the one hand. Again, with these particles, if you feel that you can fit them in and it flows nicely, then do, but they're not always necessary. So the streams around the city of water, penta kai hexaconta kai triakosiai, 5 and 60 and 300. So this is Greek numbers for you. Just link it. It's very like archaic English when you think about sort of 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie, according to the nursery rhyme. In the Greek, we get 5 and 60 and 300, which means 365. You're going to need a verb here, so you're going to have to use the verb to be. So the streams around the city, there are 365 of water. Okay, so one for every day of the year. Melitos de alai tos autai. And then, so melitos is in the genitive, just like hudatos in the line above was in the genitive. So giving us the quality of the stream. So this time of honey, and then you get alai, meaning other, another, another. And then he just gives us one word, tosautai, the same number. Tosautos is given in the vocabulary, or tosutoi rather, is given in the vocabulary for you. So, literally of honey, others the same amount. But you might want to go for something a little bit more fluid in English, like something like the same number again of honey. So there are 365 of water and then the same number again of honey, so another 365. Muru, this is a word we have had before, de pentakosiai. So muru is perfume, so of perfume. The nominative of that is muron, so muru is the genitive of perfume, and then pentakosiai. Okay, so penta you can see is to do with 5. Okay, so pentakosiai is 500. So there are 500 of perfume. And then a little qualification: mikroterai mentoi hautai. So mikroterai is the comparative. Meaning smaller. So mentoi, however, and hautai, these from hutos. So these, however, smaller. So again, you're going to need a verb. So these, however, are smaller. You see what I mean? This is building into a list. So the streams around the city, there are 365 of water, the same number again of honey, 500 of perfume, although these are smaller. You might want to translate mentoi as although rather than however, but either will work. However, these are smaller. And then kai potamoi galactos hepta, and rivers, galactos is the genitive form of milk, which is gala. Okay, so and of milk, rivers of milk, hepta, 7 as in a heptagon. Kai oinu, and of wine, so oinos you'll have met before, so oinu also the genitive, and of wine, octor. Again, no verb to be, so there are 8. So it's just a list of the rivers, so it's not too tricky. You just need to make sure that you're inserting verbs in the appropriate place, because there aren't any. I hope that's helpful. As is always the case, please do let me know if there are any questions or queries, or if you'd like to double check whether something works. I'm more than happy to receive your questions. Thanks very much.